with China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Perseverance Mindset Podcast. I am your host, John Zetzer, as always, and we're coming to you live from the famous Dialogue Den, right here in our studio. Another day in paradise, as some would say. Welcome back, Perseverance Pioneers, to the Perseverance Mindset Podcast. And again, I am your host. We are in the famous Dialogue Den where resilience meets reality, and we explore the strategy, stories, and mindset that power progress. Now, it's been a tumultuous few days for U.S. consumers, investors, and today we're tackling one of the most consequential questions in modern economies and geopolitics. Trump versus China. Who will win the trade war ultimately? And in this extended episode, we'll explore the roots of American tariff policy going back to the 80s, how NAFTA gutted the U.S. factories, and why Trump's trade war really hit a nerve as of recently, and what all this means for you, the American consumer. Let's break it down from historical context to current chaos. Now, we have to understand and get into the origins of American tariff power. Tariffs are as American as apple pie. Long before we had an income tax in the United States or a central bank, the U.S. government relied entirely on tariffs to fund itself. Some would say we'd advanced greatly since then. I believe so. They weren't just about raising revenue. They were about protecting our industries from competition. And one of the most influential moments in history came in 1890 with the McKinley tariff. It does exist. Sponsored by then Congressman William McKinley, yes, the future president, dramatically raised tariffs on foreign goods to nearly fifth goal: protect American manufacturing from cheaper European goods, especially textiles and metal goods, highly sought after items at that time. This move supercharged U.S. industrialization. Factories exploded across the Northeast, the Midwest, domestic production soared, and wages even increased. But it also had consequences too. There's always, it's too good to be true, and there's always the flip side of things. So it did raise consumer prices across the board. It did hurt farmers who faced retaliatory tariffs from Europe, and it also led to a backlash, again, helping Democrats win control of Congress in the 1890 midterms. So even in the 19th century, this debate has been ongoing. The trade debate was the same: jobs versus prices, national strength versus global cooperation. Does it sound familiar, all my pioneers out there? Now let's get into more of the meat and potatoes of this tariff and trade war that we are currently in. NAFTA and globalization. Now fast forward 100 years to 1994, and America took a sharp turn toward free trade. Again, Adam Smith, free trade absolutists that we are. That year, the U.S., Mexico, and Canada signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, as we know it. It was the product of decades of global economic thinking: tearing down borders, build efficiency, create jobs through open markets. But instead of lifting all boats, it sank quite a few factories, and more than 1 million U.S. manufacturing jobs were lost as companies closed American plants and set up shop in Mexico, Asia, and also exporting many of those works and jobs to China. Places like Flint, Michigan, Lorain, Ohio, Rockford, Illinois, once proud industrial hubs, became hollowed out and former shells of themselves. Disaster, epic disaster. Meanwhile, Wall Street cashed in on this big time. Big corporations saved on labor. Consumers got cheaper goods, but at what cost? For working class Americans, NAFTA wasn't a trade deal. It was a national eviction notice. And that's how I coined the phrase, a national eviction notice. And now let's get into more of what we're experiencing today. Now everybody is having their own take on, again, Trump going after China. It's not the right time, how Trump is doing it, how it's playing out. And again, I was listening to a recent news pundit the other day. I listen to everything, as we all know here on the Perseverance Mindset. I like to get all the viewpoints of what folks are saying out there. And excuse me, one of the broadcasters had said, I can't believe he would be doing this at this time. The president hurting American jobs, hurting American investors, this and that. We had people are coming out, even supporters of the president from the campaign, saying we had no idea. Guys, before the 2024 campaign, businessman Trump has been saying this for 40 plus years. I can't fathom how someone could say that they weren't aware that this was coming. This was coming. To voters of the president, to supporters of the president, we all knew this was coming. Again, independent here, but we all knew this was coming. When it was going to be implemented, when it was going to start happening, again, but if one thing is clear in this scenario, the president's a man of action. Whether you agree with his tactics, whether you agree with his policies, action is happening. Over 100 executive orders so early on into the second term of President Trump. But now let's get into more of the history behind more of what's happening today. In 2018, in his first term, President Trump took a sledgehammer to global trade policy. In his first official trade deal as president, he wasn't subtle. He wasn't, humble about it. Long before politics, Trump, the businessman, had said the U.S. was getting ripped off by bad deals, especially with honing in on China. In fact, you can find him in interviews from the 80s, early 2000s, blasting U.S. presidents for being too soft on China. He saw trade deficits, not as statistics, but a sign as weakness. To him, America was the consumer, and we were getting just robbed point blank, out in the open, robbed. So when he slapped these massive tariffs on Chinese steel, aluminum, electronics, and more, wasn't just policy. This was a personal belief that the president holds. He imposed over $350 billion in tariffs during his presidency, hoping to rebalance the relationship. China retaliated, the global economy felt it, and at the time, experts call it reckless. Experts were always calling things reckless because that's why we had the lack of progress that we do. Today, even his critics admit, he wasn't wrong. And we're hearing a lot of this today, even with this turmoil today. He's not wrong. It's how the policies are being implemented. Again, men of action do things in action. They're not going to be coordinated. Could it be thought out more? Yes. Could it be acted on a different way? Yes. But even then, critics were admitting he was not wrong. So in fact, even President Biden continued many of these policies. Congress, including Democrats, now openly supports reshoring jobs and holding China accountable for IP theft and unfair trade imbalances. Like you really have to just ask yourself, are people that much ahead of the curve or behind it? Now that people are fully get on board, but disagree with how it's being enacted. Whole nother question. Public opinion has swung hard on this. Over 70% of Americans now back tough trade stances against China. Trump's trade war might have started with a fire, but it lit a torch that Washington is still carrying to this day, even into the second term. And this week, Trump reignited those flames, as he was going to do in a second term, promising change and delivering on promises. He warned China, drop your 34% tariffs or we'll slap a 50% increase. That went into effect. That would bring the U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods to unheard of ever, 104% tariff on Chinese goods. And I don't even pay attention to the amounts and how the markets are doing because the money is ungodly. I will never even be able to understand how much money has been slushed through, lost, gain, points going up, Dow going down. It's not my place, not my expertise, but things are happening. And it is crazy right now. But again, China responding, of course. So now we have a 104% increase on China's goods and China vowing to fight till the end. And the battlefield isn't just the battlefield of this trade war isn't just ports and custom offices, it's cyberspace. China has launched, digital propaganda war using AI generated images on social media and bots. They're flooding platforms with videos showing American families in despair, empty grocery stores, shuttered factories, all at undermining American public trust and sentiment within the U.S. It's a very highly sought after and coordinated attack. And again, it's meant to cripple the U.S. economy. It is not just a trade war. It's a narrative war, and it's being fought right in your newsfeed on your social media every day. So now we as American consumers, where does that leave us? So what does this mean for all of us? Let's talk dollars and cents, which we'll be incorporating more on the show going forward. If you're buying a smartphone, a TV, a car, even kitchen appliances, prices just might be higher. There's no way about it. Again, inflation could rise again. It could always go up or go down, just like the stock market. But just when Americans were starting to catch a breather, we're finding ourselves involved in this trade war. Whether this is better for the short term or the long term vision and view of America, that's another story. And now we are fully engaged in this trade war. But here's the flip side. Tougher trade might bring jobs back. We can't guarantee it, but it might just do what it's intended to do. We've already seen major investments since President Trump has been inaugurated, sworn in, won the election. Apple, so many other companies, so many, SoftBank, just investing millions, billions into the U.S. Unheard of. But we've seen these investments in domestic chip manufacturing, EV batteries, and textiles. States like, Arizona, Texas, Ohio are benefiting from billions in reshoring projects long term. So that is the intent. And long term, this could rebuild economic resilience right here in the USA. More American-made goods, shorter supply chains, stronger wages. But make no mistake, we're no means on that path to be there right now. But this is what the future is going to hold. Are we willing to make these short-term changes that could impact us with some inflation and more numbers on Americans, which I detest and hate myself, but for the long-term and national security of our country, what are we to do? The road ahead is totally unclear at this point. We are not sure how all this will play out, but I am rooting for America. I am rooting for inflation to plummet. I am rooting for interest rates to plummet. And I think we can all agree on what we've been seeing on the news and between investors and consumers and supporters of the president, not supporters of the president. We need to get these deals going. So the tariffs are imposed, but we need to see things start happening, to start making these negotiations happening, to make the markets less skittish. We need to make sure that the message is out there that America will do business if other countries are willing to cooperate with our interests and are willing to help zero for zero tariff goods on U.S. imports, and not just not allowing our products into their country, as has been in place for decades. So at the end of this video, lastly, who wins this trade war that we find ourselves in right now? It's just not about who out there sells more or taxes less. It's about who can outlast, outthink, and out-innovate, frankly. And it's about independence versus interdependence, and which vision shapes, global trade for the next 20, 30, 50, 100 years. Will America rebuild its industrial core? I would love to see that. More jobs right here at home. Or will global pressures force compromise? We'll be here to track every twist and turn and what we're seeing out there for all of our Perseverance pioneers. And a special thank you for joining us today and this evening as well on this extended episode of the Perseverance Mindset podcast about China versus the U.S., the ongoing trade war. To our listeners and the Perseverance pioneers out there, keep pushing forward, stay informed, and remember, we just don't react to change, we lead through it. So this is John Zedzura signing off. Stay strong, stay sharp, and stay resilient. Thank you, everyone.